straight off. So we will go into Risso's dolphins. So I'm just going to give a quick overview. Risso's dolphins, Grampus grizzus, they are the 5th largest delphinidae, but actually they're the largest species that have actually got dolphin after their name. They're going to weigh in between 300 and 500 kilograms. They can measure between 3.5 and 4 meters as adults. Named after Antoine Risso, who was a French naturalist. And it was Georges Cuvier who decided to call them after him. And the Latin name Grampus is thought to be derived from the word which is grandis piscis in Latin, or a grand poisson. And then obviously the species name grizzus refers to this overall grey coloration of the body. Risso's dolphins are actually most closely related to false and pygmy killer whales, as well as melon-headed whales and pilot whales. No subspecies have currently been recognised. However, research is beginning to show that perhaps we do have some discrete populations with specific preferences. As you can see in the map up here on the right, they've got a worldwide distribution. They do tend to prefer the deeper waters because they're kind of just, they prefer to eat on the deep living species like squids and octopus. But there are a few places around the world where you can actually see them from land, and Scotland is one of these places. So variation in colour is one of the most distinctive characteristics of this species. So the calves, as you can see in this photograph, are born kind of like a silvery grey, and as they age, they turn kind of differing shades of grey and white. And then older individuals, males in particular, can become almost completely white. And this whitening is actually because of reduced skin pigmentation. And the scars are actually primarily caused by other Risso's dolphins when they're having social interactions. And these leave marks, which we call rake marks. But rake marks is a whole other talk that we could talk about dolphin teeth for, again, wax lyrical about them as well. But they leave these marks on the body and on the dorsal fin. But some can also be caused when they're feeding. So Risso's dolphins, as I said, like to feed on squid and octopus. So they feed round about creels, they feed on the bottom, they feed behind trawlers. So some of the scarring can come from that as well. But the scarring patterns themselves are individually unique. And that means that we can recognize individuals over long periods of time. So talking about the teeth, just between 2 and 7 pairs of teeth. They're only on the lower jaw, not on the upper jaw, because these guys are known as what we call suction feeders. So kind of a bit like a vacuum cleaner. They just kind of soak up their squid and octopus. And they can live for probably about 45 to 55 years. Another really cool thing about Risso's, which I find as well, is that they combine the acoustic features from different cetacean species. So you'll find a little bit of beaked whale in there, a little bit of bottlenose dolphins, and they can show a variety of different squeaks and buzzes and clicks. So I'm going to see if this works. Hopefully it will.
Yay.
Okay, I'm hoping that worked. Did that work for you, Siobhan? It did. Excellent. Okay. So what we can talk about now is that the obviously threats, unfortunately, the sad side of whales and dolphins is that they face many, many threats, and these threats are increasing with time and becoming more numerous. The one thing to think of with threats is that we can't ever think of them in isolation, because all these threats are cumulative, and whales and dolphins of all different species, and including Risso's, will face some level of these different threats. Entanglement is the leading concern of the leading cause of death in UK strandings, but also noise from oil and gas and wind turbines, military noise, collisions. We can have disturbance from tourism and recreational marine use. There's pollution, which includes plastics and bioaccumulated contaminants in their prey, so like mercury and PCBs, and also the impacts of climate change. And these could actually be probably potentially some of the most devastating, as these could lead to distributional shifts as a result of the warming oceans. Their prey could shift as well, therefore there's prey depletion. And one additional threat that is faced by some populations is hunting. Now, they're actually taken in several places around the world, both legally and illegally. So in Taiji, for example, in Japan, they kill an average of 138 Risso's dolphins every year. And actually within this season, the 2022-23 season, they've already taken almost 100 Rissos. Some of these will go to captive facilities, other ones are slaughtered for their meat. And I have to say that although taken in dry fonts in the Faroe Islands as recently as 2010, thankfully Rissos in the Northeast Atlantic don't have to face that threat anymore. And just to say as well that not all threats and interactions can be fatal. Some of them can actually have what must have been incredibly painful injuries. But I have to say, from a photo ID point of view, it does make them very recognizable over time. It's always a joy to see the dolphin at the top left here. We call her Lucky, and she appears to be thriving despite the lack of a dorsal fin. She's actually been seen several times over the years, twice accompanied by a calf. And in the bottom left is Floppy, and he has been seen as well with some of the same individuals over multiple years and seems to be in relatively good condition. So Rissos in the UK specifically. Well, nothing is known about the structure and the size of the global population. It is, however, listed by the IUCN as of least concern. But to be honest, that is actually quite concerning because as research is starting to show us, we actually do think that we have these discrete populations in different parts of the world who are not interbreeding with others. In the UK, legislation requires that all cetaceans have what we call a favourable conservation status. But as with all other species of cetacean, the conservation status of Risso's dolphins is completely unknown. There's only one management unit for Risso's dolphins in the UK. Well, it actually covers the whole of the British Isles waters. And the abundance for the management unit within the UK is 8,687 individuals. But the confidence levels for that are really quite kind of extreme. So it could be a lot less and it could be a fair bit more. But as I say, this just goes back to the fact that we know so little. We've got a very limited understanding of the population structure in the Northeast Atlantic. But previous research has told us, and this is from primarily Scottish data as well, indicates that there is a genetic differentiation between the UK Rissos or Rissos found in the UK waters and those found in the Mediterranean. So this means that basically they don't mate. So there is an issue where you get impacts on one population is not necessarily going to affect another because they're not interbreeding anyway. And also that means if you've got an impact that's happening on one population, it could be really devastating because this population can't be contributed to from other populations. So they're considered to be widely distributed within Scottish waters, but they're not notably abundant. There's no population estimate, as I said, certainly for Scottish waters. And really importantly, there's no information on trends. So even if we had a number, it actually wouldn't really have a context unless we could find out whether that number had increased over time or decreased over time. Populations are actually thought to be fragmented, but with individuals showing kind of site fidelity to particular areas. And I'll talk about that a little in a minute. So there's been limited research in the UK undertaken specifically on the species, particularly in Scottish waters. But back in the late 1990s, WDC co-funded a project off the east coast of the Isle of Lewis and found it to be a hotspot. And it had particularly had some large groups. And they had, really kind of high densities compared to other kind of territorial waters. So we decided it was time that we should set out and try and learn some more about them. So we returned to Lewis in 2010, and we've been undertaking land-based surveys since then, which also led to Jumping Head becoming a shore watch site in 2011. And I know we spoke briefly there about shore watch, but it's for those that don't know, it's a network of trained volunteers monitoring the presence and absence of different species of whales and dolphins at selected sites around the Scottish coastline. So once it became a dedicated shore watch site, we turned our attention predominantly to undertaking boat-based surveys where we would collect photo ID data. We deployed and retrieved, well, hopefully we retrieved, sometime we didn't, some acoustic equipment. And along with HWDT and others, we lobbied the Scottish Government to protect this area. Because our research showed that the core habitat that the animals were using when they were in the area was actually within what we proposed as a marine protected area boundary. And the photo ID catalogue suggests that Risso's dolphins are semi-resident in the area, and we've got a really high resighting rate, both within and between years. I've got some individuals in the catalogue that I have seen almost every year since 2010, since they've been in the catalogue. And really importantly, mothers and calves account for approximately 40% of the sightings that we have. So this is a really important area for Risso's. And the good news, well, we won. In December 2020, the Scottish Government designated the area that you can see here in the kind of the hashed out lines as the Northeast Lewis MPA, and it was specifically designated for Risso's dolphins and sand eels, because we all know that sand eels are important as well. So they're also protected, which is great for the puffins and the minkies and all the other species that also use these waters. So our job, however, is far from over, because we need to have a robust and an effective management plan that's also going to accompany the site. The site in itself is not going to do much if it doesn't have associated management, because otherwise it's just another paper park, really. So to get a better understanding of the species, we also need to cast our eyes a little bit further than just Lewis, because we know that Risso's are sighted around the whole coast of Scotland. So this also brings into focus the importance of photo ID, because photo ID really is a wonder when it comes to cetaceans. So basically it's a method where, as I said before, images, these scars on the individuals are long lasting. They're very unique to the individuals. So photo ID means that we can take images of the individual dorsal fins and they become like familiar faces to the researcher studying them. So as they age, they acquire more scratches. Some of them stay for longer. Some of them are, as I say, some of them fade with time. They might get new nicks, but certainly little bits of the fin are not going to grow back again. You know, they're not starfish or anything. So once something's nicked or flopped or injured, that stays there. And these photographs can really help to provide critical data, because they help us to build up a picture of individuals, about who they hang out with, which areas are critical to them, and of course, whether they're reproducing, because it's very important for us to know which areas are important for the females to be able to bring their calves up. Now, at WDC, we're very much about non-invasive research. We're very much hands-off. And the best way to be able to tell whether it's a male or a female is if they have a calf or not, which is really exciting when you find a dolphin that you've known for a while and they turn up one year with a calf. So much of this work, I have to say, couldn't actually be done without collaboration from other groups. You know, HWDT shares all their Risso's images with us that they collect on Silurian or get sent in. We've worked closely with local whale watching operators, wildlife enthusiasts, WDC citizen scientists. You know, it's really important. And we have a catalogue now of over 200 individuals on the west coast of Scotland. And this is actually set to increase. We're about to combine some more data together to increase that. And this individual here, just to show you, this is LW0011, otherwise known as Seaweed. And clearly I'm not going to give any prizes as to why he was named Seaweed when we first encountered him in 2010. But you can kind of see from these pictures how his dorsal fin changes slightly over time, but many of the markings stay the same. And then we've got here, you can see again, there's just his left side dorsal fin, again showing you how we've seen him over the years and how, as I say, sometimes you can see dolphins when you're out and you just see the fin and you know who it is. And it's really nice to name the animals as well, because you're much more likely to remember a name than you are a number when you've got, you know, 200 plus dolphins to try and remember. But what's really important is citizen scientists at work. And I think you can see here, this photograph here on the left was sent in to me by Steve Dodd, one of our brilliant shore watchers over on the Isle of Lewis. And he sent this image to me many years back saying, you know, I'm not sure if you'll be able to recognize it. And in itself, that photograph wouldn't have been able to be added to a catalogue. It's not of good enough quality. It doesn't give us 3 points that we would absolutely be able to, unequivocally be able to rematch the dolphin to. But clearly, within our catalogue, we have this animal already catalogued down as being LW0154. And therefore, Steve's image has really helped us to build a picture of that animal, because we were now able to find out where he was at a different time of the year in a different year, and again shows this repetitive sightings really help us to build up, as I say, a picture of these animals and where they are and what they're up to. So as I say, photo ID is really key. On Lewis, the majority of our sightings are actually less than 1 kilometre from shore. And some of these are actually less than 10 meters from shore, as you can see in the top left corner. I mean, these guys were literally within 5-10 meters of the coastline. And this means that land-based citizen scientists can really help us to find some of these missing jigsaw pieces. So in addition to the west coast of Scotland, for over 10 years now, people have been sending us images of Rissos from other parts of Scotland and actually other parts of the UK. But this resulted in some ad hoc catalogues that we thought we would want to create for the northeast coast of Scotland and Orkney and Shetland and Fair Isle, because they're coming from all these kind of areas. When we expanded Shore Watch into the Northern Isles, we thought, well, we're going to undertake a comprehensive review of all the images that we had received, and importantly, widen this call for images for people to send in. And we engaged with other researchers, like the guys at Crew, and also our shore watchers, wildlife enthusiasts, Nature Scout, and lots of, as I say, different local NGOs and groups and wildlife watching groups. And our aim really was to create some robust photo ID catalogues, because this is going to help our understanding of the dolphins' distribution, their habitat preferences, and importantly, social structure, and really show the value of citizen science. So we set about putting out onto social media sites, asking for photographs, and wow, we were blown away actually by the results that we got back in. We had over 1,800 photographs from 50 photographers, and these spanned between 2001 and 2022. And I'll be completely honest, some of the photographs were just tiny little kind of splashes off in the distance, but for us it's still worth being able to spend time zooming in and analysing, and you just never know when you're going to see one of those splashes is actually an animal that's got a huge chunk out of his fin, or the flopped over fins or things. So, you know, all and any photographs can actually end up being incredibly valuable. And all the photographs of this widespread area, which went from all the way from the Moray Firth through Caithness and Sutherland, Orkney, and then north to the Fair Isle and Shetland. So here, I'm going to move this one out of the way just now. So this is due to the distances, what we decided to do, that we would split the photographs into two because of where the sightings were coming from. So as I say, in Lewis, we saw quite a high rate of site fidelity, and there really is quite some distance between. So between Orkney and Shetland, you're talking over 100 miles. Between, you know, kind of Caithness or down Moray Firth, you're talking, you know, it can be almost 200. So we decided that we divide these into two catalogues for the two regions. So Shetland and Fair Isle became one, and that ended up with 47 individuals. The majority of the sightings seem to be over on the east coast. And then we had the northeast Scotland and the Orkney catalogue, which ended up with 112 individuals. These numbers actually might be a bit higher now, because we did draw a line underneath it in August 2022, because we're trying to draft a paper which will follow up and give them a lot more details on this study. But we're going to keep adding to the catalogue. So noting what some of you guys said when you'd seen Rissos before in a variety of different places, you know, from Shetland down to the southwest as well. Please do send them in to us from anywhere in the UK, because as I said, we have a Welsh catalogue. We're about to undertake work to develop a catalogue for the southwest of England, and we're also working closely with others who've got catalogues in the Isle of Man, Ireland, and over in France. So some of our initial findings have actually been really quite exciting. So I'm going to introduce you to, this is Arrow. And Arrow he's got a pretty distinct fin. You can see some of these markings down the fin. So therefore, it does make it easier to recite animals who are highly distinctive. But that doesn't mean it's any less. You just have to take that into account when we're looking at undertaking, for example, what they call a mark recapture study, which will help us to determine the population size. And that's something we're going to be doing later on into 2023, trying to answer that question and come up with a population size for Scottish waters. So Arrow himself was first seen in 2014 by a great guy called Colin Bird up in Strathy Point in Sutherland. So this was him in 2014. He was seen there again in 2016. In 2018, he was seen in John O'Groats. And then in 2018, he was seen back in Strathy again. 2020, he was seen in Holborn Head, and then in 2020, he was seen in Libster. Now, clearly he didn't go across land there. Just like to say that it does look as if he did. Now, clearly he didn't, or he'd be in a lot of trouble. But that just kind of goes to show you really kind of how he's being seen in multiple years at multiple times, you know, in different areas. He's exploring kind of similar parts of the coastline, and this would kind of infer that there is again some kind of site fidelity, that he's returning to this area time and time again for reasons which you know, hopefully we'll start to kind of tease out as we go forward. Basically, the presence of mothers and calves is one of the most highly significant things, because this shows the importance of the area, and it shows whether that's for food, whether it's for shelter, social opportunities, or other. Mothers and calves really show that this is an area which needs to be protected and is incredibly important for them. Everything in the dolphin world basically is driven by either food or sex. That's kind of what drives them. The females will be driven to reproduce. They'll then be driven to provide for their calf, to be able to keep their calf safe. And the male dolphins will be driven by the ability to reproduce, and therefore they'll follow the females. So we seem to see a pattern where we sometimes feel that we have the females are coming in and the males are coming in after, because into an area, or they're coming in to check out whether the females are there. Because obviously if a female is with a calf, she will not be susceptible, but there are chances we have seen aggression between male Rissos and females, because if they're able to remove the calf from the equation, then the female will be receptive again. So there's a lot going on out there, and as I say, it really does come down to kind of quite simply they're driven by food and sex, which is probably pretty much like the human race as well, to be honest. Maybe power and money, which I'm not sure it comes along in the dolphin world. So two of our dolphins, actually, Grove and Aiken, they were called, were actually first seen with a calf in a group in 2010, again by Colin Bird from Libster. And then in 2014, they were actually seen by Gary Bell, who spotted them up again with a calf, but this time they were over 200 kilometres away off Sombra Head in Shetland. So again, really showing the importance of both of these areas, and importantly, giving us that kind of early information that we can then start to build a picture of these animals, the lives of these animals. And what's going to be really fascinating as well is also the next step that we're looking to do is we're going to look to try and compare across the catalogues and looking to see whether we have animals that we're seeing in the west coast of Scotland, are we seeing them in north and the northeast? And I can say from very, very initial analysis, and this is not to be said as factual, but we really are starting to see that there's probably going to be a split between, again, as I say, we have animals we're seeing year round coming along to Lewis, to the waters off of Lewis, and we're starting to see individuals that are coming again year round, or at least when we're seeing them off the coast of the north coast. So this kind of gives us information that actually we've got separate populations. We potentially have separate preferences and separate habitat, and maybe even particular prey species as well. But I have to say as well, it's not just the Rissos, because all different species are going to benefit from any kind of protection and conservation that we initiatives that we can bring forward. But really importantly and interestingly, I have to say, is there such a thing as the Batizo's dolphin, or potentially the Bizzo's dolphin? We have thrown around ideas like calling it the Rottle nose, but with hybrid individuals, which is what this is about, the female species, the name is due to come first. So basically back in 2011, we noticed something odd was happening. We had taken some images of individuals that initially we thought looked like Rissos, and clearly on further inspection turned out to not be like Rissos at all. They looked like a mashed up version of a bottlenose and a Rissos and something in between. And this continued. We then encountered them again in 2012, and we've basically been documenting them ever since, with photographs going back further. Again, some of the photographs, we've had some matches within the HWDT catalogue, so we've got some really exciting news to tell on the hybrids, but that's going to be coming out in a paper that we're hopefully going to be bringing out in 2023. And I know there are potentially some people on here that will have heard me say this before, that, oh, the hybrid paper. And the problem with it is that every time we get to the point of going to publish, somebody else sends me some photographs. And I'm going to point my finger now as well at Paul, who just yesterday sent me on some photographs of hybrid dolphin, which is, I'm never going to complain. So please, again, not just Rissos, if you see bottlenose dolphins anywhere in the west coast of Scotland, please send them over, and actually even further round as well. People have asked, why is it happening? This is something that we do speculate on a lot more in the paper. We talk about, does the actual observed hybridization of multiple individuals, this is not just one individual, does it mean there's a genetic bottleneck? And does this mean, for example, that maybe the female bottlenose dolphins, there's not enough mates for them to mate with, so they've decided to try out the Rissos, or maybe the Rissos, there's not enough females for the males to mate with? Because we certainly do seem to see that the female of the species, it's the female, the mother, the bottlenose dolphins, and the male, the father, or the Rissos dolphin. We've not seen it going the other way. We're seeing it, as I say, female-driven bottlenose. And also, what does this mean for the future? Because clearly, again, this is not just a one-off. This is something which we've documented multiple times, with multiple animals, and as I say, multiple individuals breeding more than once. So this is something which needs further discussion. And as I say, there will hopefully, fingers crossed, be a paper out in this later on in 2023. And just to also show, there is some further reading. You can have a look at a paper we wrote back in 2014, which was just the first discovery of the potential hybridism. And also there's a TEDx talk, if you just Google the dolphin dating game on YouTube, and you'll be able to see it, and it gives you a quick 10-minute teaser of, again, what we're kind of finding there, and a bit more information. And then also here, just to show you as well, this is not just one individual that we've seen, or even two. I'd say we certainly have quite a fair few different, you can see, you know, whether it's here you can see on the beak of this individual, again, you can see this one, this guy here, he is absolutely massive. We all think that Risso's dolphins are huge, and people tend to confuse them with orca, and they get mistaken for orca. This guy is bigger than a Risso's by, at least another third the size. His fin towers. I've got a picture somewhere of him hanging out with a bottlenose dolphin, and it looks as if the bottlenose dolphin's about the size of a porpoise. So he really is pretty huge. And again, as I say, you're seeing up here in the top left, you can see this is a pod of bottlenose dolphins, and these guys are all being identified and catalogued as individual bottlenose dolphins. We have seen them all out of the water, so we're able to confirm that they're bottlenose. And clearly this individual here has a calf which is more looking like a Risso's than it does look like a bottlenose dolphin. So fascinating goings on out in the Western Isles, and yeah, that's hopefully something that we're going to be finding out more about and really understanding the conservation implications for. So that actually turns out to be me. I can't believe I've managed to see. I'm so scared I was going to go over time. I've probably skipped ahead a bit too quickly, but I just want to say thank you to you guys for all listening, to our funders, and to the guys that work so closely with us, providing photographs, and also to the amazing people. As I say, I couldn't possibly name all of them. There's so many of them, some fantastic people, from Karen Hall to Hugh Harrop, Colin Bird, Steve Dodd, just fantastic. Thank you ever so much for sending your images. And as I say, if anybody has any from anywhere, and they can be historical, they don't have to be from new ones that you take, then please send them in to me. My email address is there, and also you can find me on Twitter. So please, yeah, any questions, I'd be more than happy to